So I want to welcome you for joining me this evening on how to create a personalized ritual. So what I'd like to do is just begin in creating sacred space, just taking a moment to set aside the cares of the day. And let's just start with breathing for grounding and for centering. So we start by taking that nice deep breath in through your belly, in through the nose and out through the mouth, allowing the energies to easily flow throughout your body. A breath in to take in right now, to sense everything going on around me in sound or in feeling. And a breath out, I center where I am in this present moment. And a breath in to invite the energies of a new way of being into my life. And a breath out to leave behind the chaos and busyness. And I am present in this moment. So welcome to creating a personalized ritual. I wanted to share this because I think that many people are struggling with daily life and managing to find time for themselves and understanding how to connect with themselves, with each other, and with spirit. And so I felt that creating a personalized ritual would help people to understand some of the elements and how they could take that away to use for themselves. So the ancient practices of the indigenous people show us how they followed natural cycles, and they kept their communities and themselves in balance. They observed nature to show them where they were not in balance. But you don't have to become a shaman to learn how to use these ancient practices. There are three valuable aspects of shamanism that can be implemented by anyone, and that is education, ritual, and ceremony. So education, this is about taking in information and knowledge. And this can be from reading about something, being taught by someone else, or observing through personal experience. So for example, if you decide that you want to learn how to meditate, you might read a book about it. You might listen to someone describe how they do it and what process they go through to successfully meditate. And then finally, you might actually try meditation for yourself and experience what that is like for you. So now we've taken the knowledge and we've integrated it and made it our own so that it turns into personal wisdom. The other aspect of shamanism is ceremony. And ceremony is about honoring the divine. It can be the bridge between our ordinary reality and our non-ordinary reality. And it's a deeply felt way to honor events in our lives that we want to hold sacred. Ceremony reminds us how connected we are with spirit and our divine nature, and to really celebrate the honor of being alive. And in the past, we, in smaller communities and our slower paced lifestyle, most people belong to a community center or a local group, perhaps even a church. And so ceremonies were very common. People had big weddings, they had big funerals, they maybe had foul suppers or possibly church events. Excuse me. And these were really integrated into the community. And in our modern times, where people have gotten a little bit more industrialized, or in the system of the internet, I fear that some of these rituals and ceremonies have gone by the wayside, and people have forgotten how to connect. Um, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the other aspect of shamanism is ritual. Now, the difference between ritual and ceremony is that ritual is a two-way communication with spirit. And you can ask spirit, your guides, your higher self. You can ask God in prayer, and you may see your prayers answered. Ritual introduces a process where you can use a series of objects or practices to invoke your connection with your spiritual self. But in this process, in addition to asking, you can also listen for answers or direction. For example, you may develop a morning ritual which includes you sitting in a certain chair or a place in nature, or you might light a candle or have special music playing and do a short meditation. And when you continually repeat this process, it soon creates a message to your higher self to invoke spirituality. And it tells spirit when you set up that ritual that you are ready to communicate with the divine. So how can we create a personal ritual? Ritual helps us to build our vision into our daily life. It's the spiritual component of your vision that you're creating for your life. And in order for the ritual in this instance, so we all have rituals. So brushing our teeth in the morning and getting dressed and bathing is our morning ritual. So a ritual can have, and it's something that we repeatedly do every day. But when we're talking about a spiritual ritual, we're invoking our spiritual self. And that is actually one of it is the most important aspect of a ritual, is invoking your spiritual self, because that's the aspect that we want to start creating, that bridge between our human selves and our spiritual self, or our higher self, or whatever you want to call it, and also with spirit. And so in order for the ritual process to be successful, if you're going to create a daily ritual, you may wonder how to do that. And I would highly recommend that for you to ensure success, that it has to be something that you'll be able to do easily and you'll be readily able to do. It should be short and easy to perform, and that way you'll build success by doing the ritual at the same time of day and build it into your daily or weekly schedule. The important part about a ritual is more your intent than your actions. Intent is powerful, and we are a planet of free will, and so Spirit is offering us these higher vibrational energies, and they're all around us. But our guides and our angels cannot come in unless we ask them to, because they're all around us. But because we have free will, they cannot interfere. So this is where you're setting your intent and asking is so important. It's the most powerful thing you can do, is to open that door to the higher self, to the higher levels of consciousness, and your helpers will flood in to help. So I want to be very clear. Many of us along our spiritual path have often thought we compare ourselves with others, and we think, oh, that person is so gifted. I don't know how I'll be able to do that. But in all reality, humans, just like we have a circulatory system, we have physical systems, we also have exactly the same spiritual system. And so we all have that ability to connect with the divine, and we all have the opportunity to engage with spirit in exactly the same way. And each of us are very unique and personal. And because we're imbued with free will and it's our birthright, then all we have to do is show the willingness and practice. So I just wanted to talk about the mechanics of why we don't necessarily feel that we're connected with spirit, or why we struggle. So when you think about the evolution of our generations, you might think back to the 60s and 70s, and you remember that people basically lived in a three-dimensional world. Anything you could see, touch, taste, that was reality. And it wasn't until the 60s and 70s when the hippie age, where they started experimenting with mind-altering drugs, that obviously they found a way to surpass that 3D reality and enter into a multi-dimensional realm where they could see their higher self, or they could get messages in an easier way. Now, in the 80s and 90s, just from my observation, I would think that more people started getting into meditation, then people were using yoga and many different methods rather than just drugs to get them there. But the experience was that you had to practice meditation before you could experience that, have that higher consciousness experience. But what's happening in the human evolution is that the energies now are supporting our journey to higher consciousness. And so we don't have to necessarily sit and meditate for hours at a time to actually connect with the divine. And where we're headed as a higher consciousness or higher vibrational human being is that we're actually going to be connected with our innate self, with our higher self, and with the other side the other side of the veil, or with spirit, whatever you want to call it, will be connected 24/7. So for those of us old souls who are feeling that yearning and feeling that seeking, this is what we're doing, is we're now creating the bridge from 3D to multidimensional, where we will have access. And the actual mechanics of it is we all have a pineal gland, and it's located in the back of the head here, and it's related to the third eye and the optic senses, right? And so what happens is that pineal gland actually has filters. And so those filters are brought down just like a little trap door. And we have to work to open up that little door and remove the filters. And so it does take a little bit of practice and persistence to do so, to create those unfiltered, multidimensional aspect of ourselves. But the persistence pays off, because as we get more and more comfortable and allow and surrender to the experience, then more and more we will get those messages and we'll be more connected. Sorry about that, just a little glitch. I guess my internet's a little bit slow. So that was just a review of the mechanics of how this higher consciousness works. So when you put it in that,
gone again.
So when we put it in that perspective, we understand that it's just like another body function. So there's no greater than or lesser than. It's just getting into practice to open up that pathway of communication. So it takes away the stigma that I am more connected to the divine, when really it's absolutely our birthright for all of us to be connected. But it is a personal journey, and so each one of us will open up to that to that higher consciousness as is right for us and as our unique pathway allows. So, of course, on the flip side is we are the pioneers of this journey. And so you may think back, you might have been on your spiritual path for a while, and everything seems so, it was challenging, and we feel like we've been on an uphill climb. And then somebody comes along behind us, and everything seems so easy to them. Well, the reason is because we're pioneers paving the way for them. So as we're increasing in consciousness, it's going to be easier for those around us to awaken and to step onto this path of consciousness. So we really are the pioneers of this experience. So the work that we're doing as old souls who are inviting in these new energies is very important. And so I encourage you to keep going, keep trying, and keep opening up to these, to your multidimensional self, which is just, it's there and it's available to you. The energies are all around us, just like the air we breathe. So the shaman also talks about the levels of perception and the levels of engagement. And I just wanted to briefly talk about, to explain it. So here's an example. I have my cell phone, okay? Now, when I look at something from different perspectives, so you might describe this. This is wide, and it's rectangular. Now, if I change your perspective and I turn it this way, then you say, oh, it's skinny, it's long, not very big. Now, if I change your perspective again, you think, oh. So if you had never seen a cell phone before and you're describing it, then you're seeing now a very different perspective where you've opened up the door. Oh, perfect. We're matching.
That's funny.
Very cute. So you can see how a different perspective and looking at things from a different way really changes how you perceive it. And so the shaman talks about these levels of engagement. And so I'm just going to share my screen with you. Oops, I have to do the screen share first. Just to share this image to talk about the levels of engagement. So you see here's the person, and you're probably very familiar with the chakras in the body, or the main chakras in the body. There are many more, but these are the major ones that most people know about. So now the levels of engagement are a little bit more a general area on the body, but what they are is we have what is called an assemblage point. So this is talking about that bubble or aura or light energy field around us. And so it's like a donut around us, and it actually goes meters out from around our body. And it can, when we're in nature and it's out fully expanded, it's very wide. But sometimes when we're in the city, or if we're not feeling safe, it collapses in right near our body. So when we work with this energy system and change our levels of engagement or our perceptual states, we can really change how we look at things. And so I wanted to share what those perceptual states are just very briefly tonight, just to get you to understand how when we move our perceptual state, we can actually do it mechanically, and actually it enables us to connect with spirit more easily. So we start with the level of serpent, which is called the literal. And it is near the first chakra. That's where the literal is the things that we see, hear, touch. That's our reality. So a phone is a phone. It is what it is. And there's lots of words to describe it because it's literal, it's real, it's what you can see, smell, touch, taste. Then when we move to the next level of perception or the level of engagement, we're talking about jaguar. So that moves just a little bit further up on our body. And this level is called the symbolic. And so this is a perceptual state that has just a little bit more dimension to it. So now we all understand the word symbol. So now this phone can represent something else. It can represent communication, connection, because of what the phone does for us. So now you start to see how we're having a little bit different perception because we're looking at symbols. And this is where our emotions, so if you take a rose, for example, at the literal, a rose is a flower, it might be red, it's very, there's lots of words to describe it. But now when you go to the symbolic and you're looking at a rose can be a symbol for love. And it starts to invoke emotions and mental pictures. So it starts to have a little bit more, um, more a little bit more feelings, still quite a few words, um, but a little less literal. Now when we engage into the level of the hummingbird, this is the next level of perception. And so we at the level of hummingbird, it is at the mythic. And so the mythic is where we start to see a little bit bigger picture. And so we start to see how a rose can be so much more symbolic of something so much more. And it really starts to show like a journey. It's so the bigger picture and the soul's journey. So now a rose can be a symbolization of a deeper journey and one stop along that epic journey. So it starts to have much more invoking more pictures and more impressions and far less words. Then when we go to the top level of, or the next level is eagle, and this is the level of the divine. And so this is where we start to see again more of the big picture. So now, like if we were flying on an eagle's back and looking at the rose, now the rose, we can see the big picture and how it fits into the grand scheme of things, but also we can start to see how the minute details, just like an eagle can. And so we start to piece together much more impressions, and there really are no words to describe. Um, it's more of a feeling, and when you get that feeling that you say, I just can't describe it, it was just so wonderful. There are no words because it's at the level of the mythic. When we start to do our spiritual work at this level, at the level of eagle, that's where the magic happens, because now we're starting to connect with our soul's journey. So we're connecting with where time is, we're now stepping into timelessness. We're now stepping into spirit, and we're starting to create at a level of energy. And when we work with energy where there are no words for it, that is where we can make dramatic changes in our life, because we are everything is so much more fluid and movable. We're not restricted by the 3D reality at time and physical restraints. So those are the levels of engagement that I wanted to share with you, just so that you understand how a ritual can become so powerful. And so actually, most of us, actually 90% of us, spend most of our time at level 1 or 2, the literal or the symbolic. So it's it's not until we step into an altered state of mind or a mythic state where the energy moves very flows very easily, and where we really start to make powerful changes. So we have a donut or a spot on our energy field where it's a natural place where the energy from the outside world comes into our energy system. So you know how you're sitting in a room and you're maybe focused down, you're not looking around, but you can sense when somebody's standing behind you or somebody's staring at you? That's because your energy field is informing you. So we don't just take in our information through sight, sound, through the literal senses. We actually have a little portal in our energy field where we engage with the outside world. And so when we take this portal and we move it around, we'll find it in its natural resting place somewhere in the Western society, somewhere in between our hips and our shoulder. So we can actually find it, and if you use your hands to feel, you'll actually be able to find this little donut or opening, this little portal. And so we can actually mechanically move that around to change our levels of engagement. And so you can actually move it to the literal, to the symbolic, or up to the mythic. And so we can get a very different perspective, just like we were looking at the phone. Then we start to get a different perception. So if we're looking at something from the literal, we might sense what's really going on. So it's void of emotion. It's very black and white. It's what's happening. So a stone is a stone, a rock is a rock, right? But when we move our perception up to the symbolic, then we start to get feelings, impressions about it, and then we move it to the mythic, and now we start to see how that stone perhaps can be part of an epic journey in some way, and we start to get messages of connection. And so we can talk more at a future time about how to actually mechanically move that. But just so that you understand that we can move our perceptual states. And that's what we want to do when we're working in our ritual, because we want to move to the mythic where it becomes so much more powerful. So talking about ritual and how to create our own personal ritual, now you can understand how quickly a ritual can become powerful, because you're setting your intent, you're changing your perceptual state to be more connected with spirit, and now you want to start to set up the physical things, because we are human and we like physical things to trigger our emotions, our mental thought processes. And so that's where the ritual can become personalized, because those things that you want to use to engage yourself. So when you're setting up a ritual, you may want to set up a certain space that becomes your trigger point. So maybe a certain chair, or if you have a small altar you might want to sit in front of, because what we're doing is we're setting up a physical experience that is going to invoke our higher self to say, okay, Deanna's ready to do her work. Let's begin. And so the more we do it, the more we're creating a pathway to allow that to happen much more quickly and powerfully. And we don't have to spend hours in ceremony or ritual to allow that to happen. So one of the other things that I encourage you to do is to consider what you might want to have as those personal triggers that you could set up for yourself that will invoke your spiritual self to say, I'm ready to connect and have a two-way conversation. So I highly recommend that you use the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. So we can use anything from those elements. For example, we have our candle this evening, which is the fire element. So it reminds us of the human spirit, it reminds us of spirit, and it reminds us of the ability to rise from the ashes like the phoenix and to really reinvent ourselves and recreate, just as Mother Earth uses fire to mulch up the energies very quickly and recycle them to be reused. And we can also use water. So, in the form of water, you could have perhaps a favorite object that represents water for you, or the ocean, connectedness. So, perhaps you've had a wonderful holiday where you sat at the ocean, or perhaps you had a wonderful experience where you were able to do whale watching or swim with the dolphins or something like that. So, if you had a special memento from your trip, you may want to include that as part of your connection so that you invite the element of water. So, your connection to water, your connection to the ocean, because the ocean is the symbolism of connectedness, that we're all drops of the same ocean. Same as air. So we might want to invite the element of air into our ritual, and it may be by using our own voice. It may be by entering into an altered state using drumming or some sort of music. Because when we connect with music, it can take us to that altered state. It helps to ground us as well as take us to the mythic, to that altered state in a very natural way. So when we sit and breathe and listen to a beautiful piece of music, it can actually take us to that altered state. So we covered earth, air, fire, and water. So you may want to choose aspects of those elements, or if you have any special mementos or special experiences that you set up and create that have personal meaning for you, then you're actually saying to spirit, I'm ready. You're saying to your higher self, I'm ready. And it starts to create that new pathway for creating a ritual that is going to be powerful and meaningful for you. So, how you do that is very open to um, however you would like to do that. Um, so tonight, when we started, we actually began with deep breathing. I just wanted to share how important I feel breathing is, because breath is actually the mechanism for which we can personally move our energy flow. And we can use our breath to connect with Mother Earth, to connect with Father Sun, and really allow those energies to flow throughout our body. So, what happens in modern society, because the earth has a magnetic grid and we are actually connected. That's why we stay, because we're magnetized to the earth. And the earth has actually the energies to nurture and sustain us. So when we're in modern society and we're in the city and we get disconnected from the earth, then we start to feel spacey, ungrounded, and very our breathing actually becomes very shallow. And so when we reground and start to build that magnetism, scientists have actually, there's actually a current video from YouTube that is showing the science of grounding with the earth and how powerful it is. And it can actually help us against autoimmune diseases. It can help with our health and our happiness and our well-being. So I won't get into that in any more detail because they are actually scientifically proving how useful grounding is to us. So we shared breathing, we shared how to take the four elements, and we shared the importance of setting our intent when we begin this journey of creating a ritual. The next important thing that I just want to mention is how important setting up the sacredness of a ritual, because brushing our teeth in the morning is a ritual, but it probably isn't particularly significant. Some people might even go away and think, did I brush my teeth? Because it becomes so automatic. Our brain just works on autopilot. So we want to guard against our spiritual ritual becoming something that is meaningless. We want to keep our intention, keep our focus so that it creates meaning for us, because we don't want it to become an everyday meaningless autopilot activity where we think, did I do my ritual today? Did I connect? We never want to have it become that automatic. We want to make sure that we include the deepest of meanings for it. So I just wanted to share. So there's, because we were going to have 5, I was wanting to make sure that everyone has time to share, but because we have a little bit smaller group than anticipated, I guess I'll share my what I use in my ritual to invoke the divine. So one of the things that I use is oracle cards. Everyone's probably familiar with the tarot decks and how we can use our intuition to ask questions to connect, and we pull the cards and ask what their significant meaning is. Now, it does take a little bit of practice when you use the tarot deck. There's a little bit of practice to develop the skill set, but there are so many beautiful decks of oracle cards out there that they have the little guidebook with them, and I have a whole collection that I use, and I shuffle and ask Spirit to give me a special message, and I read the little book, I listen for the messages and how it applies to me, and there's really no skill involved. So if that calls to you, I encourage you to pick up an oracle deck of some kind that really speaks to you, and just use it. Pick one a day, perhaps, or whenever you feel the calling to receive the message. As well, we can of course, use the breathing and meditation, or using yoga poses. Those are very common ways. I was shown that when we use the yoga pose in this way, that we put our hands together, we're actually balancing and connecting our left and right brain. And so even this simple technique of this the yoga pose of putting our hands together has a lot of shall I say it's spiritual significance, but it also has impact on our physical self. So that's only one aspect of what I've been shown. And so there are many ways that you can personally connect, whether you like moving meditations such as Tai Chi, or walking. Walking is simple, easy, and it's a way to connect with your outdoor surroundings. So those are all ways that I use for meditation. Of course, as a shaman, I am a pipe holder, so I do use my pipe to connect with spirit, and I am a mesa carrier in the Inca tradition, and so when I decide that I want to connect with the divine, I open up my mesa and start to connect. It becomes my altar. So in conclusion, I just wanted to talk about some of the upcoming programs so that those who are listening, if they want to share in another event with us, the next meetup that I've scheduled is for Sunday, March 25th, and it'll be the same time, 7 p.m. And so we're going to take it one step further and talk about how to create a ceremony. And within that, I'd really like to share the kinds of ceremonies that you might want to create, as well as the stages of a ceremony. So we can talk about the mechanics of a ceremony again, and we'll also have some personal sharing time. Because that's what creates a community, is our stories and our sharing from the heart. So thank you very much for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes.